building companies, like, excuse my language, is like freaking hard. Like, even when it's successful, even when it's growing, and so like you have to have some joy from what you're doing and stay close to that joy. You can have the most incredible team, you can have the most incredible product, and people love using it. You can have the most incredible distribution, but if you have a terrible market, you'll never succeed. The missing ingredient of like long-term success is that you need to know a market that is not obvious. Whoa, how you
Hi.
doing?
Good, how you doing?
Yeah.
No, all good. So you should see my setup. Uh, so I'm in a WeWork,
Okay.
but like this light was like, so I took a stackless hat and I'm like propping it up and I'm trying to get like my lighting right. And so
Okay.
anyways, I think to start, just sort of talk, um, prior to arcade, so sort of how you got here, and anything in your history or past that sort of like led you to this, and then we'll get into like the super early stuff around arcade.
Okay, great. So I can share a little bit of my personal background and like how I got started at Arcane. So I've been a marketer for my almost my entire career. So my first job was in consulting out of college. And I remember I was staffed on this project, and I told the project leader at one point, like, hey, like they just solve all the problems by just buying this tool. And the project leader was like, "Oh no, we can't do that because then they won't bill us for the hours." And I was like a moment where I was like, "Okay, I don't really want to be a consultant. I want to be inside a product and a team and build software." So I quit that job and moved across the country to join this company now called, you may not know, it's called Hightail. It was like a document collaboration software, and it was a competitor to Box at the time.
Okay.
And the first day in the job, they like laid off majority of the marketing team and they said, okay, now have you have a marketing experience, but you need to learn how to do product marketing. So lead the mobile launch. And that was a terrifying moment. And
No
I
pressure.
on the job, and I just like put together creative content and the campaign plan, and I loved it. I was like, this is so interesting. I really love talking to customers and being creative. Um, and then I joined Atlassian in 2015, and I was one of the first marketers on Jira Service Desk, which is like Jira for IT teams. And we're competing against ServiceNow, which is, as you know, is like a huge company, a huge market. And with this at the time, like a tiny upstart, we didn't really have a pricing and packaging figured out and trying to take market share. And what we really realized early on is that the way we were going to win against ServiceNow is that we had a far superior product experience. It was way easier to get set up. Um, the way we're going to do that is by showcasing it really early to customers who are considering different solutions. So I was the one building blog content, webinars, social media campaigns, and of course, video. And Atlassian at the time was very democratic in the sense they didn't like to outsource, they didn't like to um, like pass off too many people. So I was the one doing the videos inside these tools. What when I was done,
Did you
like
have any background, or this was this all just on the job training from the last job and
yeah,
this
I was just
job?
like,
Yeah.
my manager at the time was like, hey, you should consider using this tool called ScreenFlow. Uh, so yeah, I was like,
So
okay.
good.
So I just did that. Yeah, it's just very time consuming and annoying. So anyway, that was the experience that really opened my eyes to like the pain of being a what as a prime marketer, what you're on the hook for and how you spend your time. And now, of course, with AI, it's like a completely different world. So that's my personal experience in marketing and how it got me started.
Well, even so, you talking about the screenflow thing. Like, I think even as a startup entrepreneur, like just recording each of those pieces and then like hand editing it and like going through all the you're basically when you're a team of one or two, then you kind of have to take all those things on, and until you dive into it you don't realize how much time you spend just trying to like set up onboarding and documentation and and recording stuff, and then loom is easy, but also then you just have like 50 looms in a folder and you're like, here you go. um So prior to starting, like when you came out of school, was there anything in your like? Do you have entrepreneurial business, in your family, or like were there things that sort of had led you toward marketing, for school?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always grew up with entrepreneurial family members. Actually, the biggest one is my grandmother. She never was a classic entrepreneur in the sense that she like started a company, but um, she like helped a lot with childcare growing up, and she would always come with like these random prototypes of like different things. At one point, she showed me this like this it was a little misguided, but there was like this flowers and like she would put tinfoil behind it so that it looked like there was more flowers. And then another time she like really wanted to change the umbrella where like a lot of time it tears because it's fabric. But she had this concept around this plastic umbrella. And it was very complicated and unwieldy thing. And then another time Starbucks had a competition around to anyone to submit a better uh coffee cup sleeve to prevent burning your hand. And so a lot of times growing up, I would be just tinkering with my grandmother on these different prototypes. And back then, it was, I mean, it's not super long ago, but it was like a few generations ago that I would be transparent that, like, if you were a woman, it was a little bit different. Like, you didn't have as much opportunities. She didn't have the education or the access to like make an impact in the way that she wanted. But her creative spirit really is something I've always carried with me, and in some ways I would love. I wish sometimes you could see what I'm doing now, and even in my office. Above my desk, there's a letter that she wrote to me, and it's about her dreams for me in the future. And I was in high school at the time, so she was like telling me how it's okay to fail, and so she's a big inspiration. And then for my parents, my dad's an architect, and my mom's a lawyer, and they both worked all their lives. And I like to say, I got my sense of urgency and I get discipline from my mother and my creativity from my father. So I hope it's the best of both worlds. But yeah, I've all been surrounded by hardworking people, and they instilled in me very early on the importance of um, trying out new ideas and also working hard.
That I love that because it's almost like the way you describe it, I can see the mixture of all the ingredients that went into you in terms of your entrepreneurial, like getting into marketing and then basically just that, like, I'm gonna figure it out, getting in deeper water than you probably should be and just being like, it's fine, I'm gonna figure it out. And then starting, arcade. It's amazing. And I love the inspiration from your grandmother because you can see the same sort of thing to your point. Like she might not have had either the resources or any, that there were hurdles for her to be able to execute it. But then that thread, like you pulled that thread into the future. And so, basically you're the one kind of executing on that with and for her, which is so good.
Yeah, yeah, just got it. Keep going and keep executing and make sure that we IPO someday. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. And so when you went to college, did you go for marketing? Was that the focus?
No, I majored in the most random major, which is Latin and Greek. So I grew up yeah, so in high school did that, and in college I was like took a bunch of classes. I've always been interested in linguistics, so did that, and it's very natural to me. And so I majored in that, and yeah, so I've not utilized that knowledge as much, but it was a really cool experience to have that humanities background.
Would you do it again and do it the same way, or would you spend more time in sort of other startups? Like what would you follow the same path again?
Yeah, you know, yes and no. I think I would do the same thing. Like, I think I loved my experience being in classics because one, it was a very small group of us. Two, is I was given a ton of freedom and creativity around other. So I went to college at Princeton, and they have this thing called a thesis, which is that during your senior year, you have to like write a um, long form like book basically. Um,
Mhm.
and the average like 100 pages depending on the topic. So I told my advisor that I wanted to write something very creative, and so I wrote a play. for my thesis. And I think that if I was in a different department, I would have not had nearly as much bandwidth or leeway. So I love that feeling of intimacy in the department, and also the freedom I was given. So I wouldn't have changed it. Uh, the thing that I wish I did spend more time on is, I would have taken more engineering classes. I think that what's still interesting is that so much of Princeton is theoretical. It's not necessarily application based, and I think there's no replacement for learning doing things on the job. So even today, I make sure I budget time over the weekend and during the week on like testing out new tools, like vibe coding, like seeing how it works, because it's so easy to fall behind. It's not like one moment in time you're educating yourself with a degree. It's more like, how hungry are you to keep learning, keep pushing your comfort zone? And I think one thing that is an unfortunate bias in tech is like skewing towards younger people and hiring younger engineers. But I will say that it's assumption around like being willing to test the boundaries of like what's possible. And so having that fire and ability to do that is more important than the degree you have.
Yep. Oh, I would totally agree, and I think you're right. I think it's almost like this generation, even for generations previous, like especially when you went into a job, you typically had a stack that you kind of worked with, and you got really good at a stack, and you went to the next job, and you're like, I'm really good at the stack, and now it's moving so fast that from one day to the other, somebody could be like, "Oh, have you used so and so? It's great. I started using it yesterday." And you're like, "No, I haven't even heard of that." What is? And you gotta go like sign up and then just like at least do 5% of it and be like, "Okay, I get generally what that is and how I might work it into my workflow where there's efficiencies." But it's happening all the time.
It's happening so fast. I mean, we spend a lot of time in video because our product is an interactive demo product, but we have a lot of video components, and the generative models, like they're being updated every week. And so like I just like a few days ago I was like, team, what do we think about Solar 2? Like how does that compare to Google View? And to me is if you're not actively spending time talking about it, evaluating it, then we're not doing a job well. And also, we're not doing it well for our customer base either.
And important for the team, you basically have to have somebody on the team where you have to have enough of the team members that are sort of they have that
Yeah,
itchy need that when something comes out, they immediately get into it so that you can sort of turn to someone and go, what do we think? And someone's like, I've already spent 10 hours in it. Like, here's the deal. And that they can sort of do it because everyone can't look at each other and be like, I don't know.
yeah, because there's like this interesting trend happening in companies where I'm curious, like if there's something experience as well, where you have companies that are branding themselves as AI native. So they start off in this AI era, and whether through owning their own model or having a very specific application for AI. So that's one inherent category of a company. But then there's a lot of companies that started off as more traditional SaaS companies, and there's like this internal cultural transformation where like you have to really, if you're going to survive and even thrive in this new world, you have to really change like how you show up and like how your team shows up, and it's through internal agent deployment and other things. So and the way you drive change and also encourage people to adopt things through leadership. And so if I'm not actively spending time evaluating things, then who else is going to? I mean, I'm sure I'll hear from the engineering team, but I'm not. Someone needs to be like, especially on the leadership level, consistently think about it. So it's I think it's such a critical thing, and it's so easy to sweep it on the rug or stay focused on the email and just Slack, but it's just a really important thing.
I think you've got to have everyone at every touch point, and especially now as teams even get smaller and they're more focused. Well, you can almost do more with smaller teams, but everyone has to kind of have that surface area of what's happening and what's moving. Because I think if you've just got blinders, and you also have to have such a fluid team that if you say, "Hey, we're as of today, we're starting to use this. We're not using this anymore." You can't have a team that's like, "What do you mean?" And like, "No, I got to learn a new thing." Like like I remember mid 2000s, you're going to swap out and you're going to go from one platform to the other, and people, oh man, now I have to learn this, there's whole new workflows, and now it just kind of is part of the requirement that you've got to be fluid.
For sure.
Well, so all right, so you went from you went from basically jumping in and sort of learning and marketing, and then you went to Atlassian. Was Atlassian where you sort of like um, where you started to pick up both? I mean, Atlassian's pretty huge, but like that kind of startup building mentality plus market. Like where did you start to get a lot of the things that seeded what then sort of led into Arcade?
I think that is one area where I picked it up. At the time, Atlassian this is 2015. It was like a few hundred employees. So it wasn't quite a startup, but we were kind of like a startup within the company because we had a brand new product. We're still figuring out so many things. So that was a really interesting experience. See from a first principle standpoint, like how do you think about building a product? I would say one thing that people tend to spend a lot of time on is they talk about the wins. They're like, oh yeah, this company, I coasted on the success of this company. But what people don't spend time on is the failure. And for me, coming from a company that effectively in my mind failed, they got acquired for like peanuts, and they're like a relevant company at this point. Um, there were great people at that company, but I just saw firsthand what it's like to not have product market fit and to struggle against like trying to become relevant, trying to get people to use the product. Um, to a company that was beloved and like had tons of users and adoption, and to me that was the real lesson. And the big takeaways is that you kind of have to have the fundamentals always, which is building a product that solves a pain point that has incredible user experience, is priced in a way that you're not consistently fighting a uphill battle when it comes to adoption. That to me was a more important education in some ways from a startup standpoint, or being in that at last and just seeing that contrast and the struggle versus the what it's like to grow organically. Um, yeah.
Amazing. So you picked up marketing and you picked up product and business and teams, and then you picked up what has to be one of the most important things also, especially for an entrepreneurial founder, is investment.
Mhm.
What was the sort of pivot shift going from marketing investment?
Yeah. So when I went to business school, I was in this exploratory mindset of like, this is an interesting segment of the market that I never spent time on. So I wasn't even explicitly looking to break into venture capital. More like this is more of a curiosity. So I did an internship at Lightspeed, which was great. And I worked with actually Knuckle. He's still in VC and he's a fantastic person to work with. And for anyone considering working in investing or taking his cash, you should consider it. But so he was awesome. But then I realized, I don't know if investment for me. Like I want to go back into building. Towards the end of business school, I got an email from Alfred Len, who is a GP at Sequoia. And he was like, oh, we should have a conversation. And I was like, wasn't really thinking about going to venture capital, but you don't say no to an email from Alfred at Sequoia. So
But then basically a
yeah,
gold medal, or the team with the most gold medals emails and goes, "Hey, want to talk?"
yeah.
Like, that's amazing.
And still he won't tell me how he got my email. But
Uh,
so I showed up and it wasn't a that actually the specific role wasn't the right fit. But then I got to know the team, including Brian and Brian Shire, and we ended up realizing there was this longer term opportunity working together. And so I was a chief of staff for him, and it was also an incredible experience. Just seeing the landscape, seeing how Sequoia evaluated companies, as well as the thinking about the future. So there's a lot of things I carry with me today around always like relentlessly being thoughtful about like moving forward from like learnings to like, always wanted to win, always wanted to be reinventing themselves and like not just coasting on the success of past companies. So that was really inspirational and powerful to witness.
would you say that would be one of the like? Was there a handful of things like that that you felt like were invaluable before you started raising your own funds? Like, for someone starting out on their own venture, like what would be something that you learned from that Sequoia period where you would say like there's a couple of like key
Yeah, I
things
mean,
that
there's
you
a lot of
gotta?
Yeah, there's a lot of classic takeaways. I think one is if I don't know, this is my personal perspective, but I've seen it a little bit in venture, which is that you can have the most incredible team of engineers or, you know, brilliant people. You can have the most incredible product, and people love using it. You can have the most incredible distribution, but if you have a terrible market, you'll never succeed. And so I think that where a lot of founders just get tripped up and just don't really consider the missing ingredient of like long term success is that you need to know a market that is not obvious. Because if it's super obvious, then people would have built for it already. You have to have like a secret, whether you know through being formerly working in, the business, in that industry or you're personally passionate about it. And recognizing that something could change so that that market it could become new and grow exponentially bigger than you realize it. So that was a really big lesson I learned. Got to saw so many brilliant founders, brilliant teams, brilliant products, but they were just in a market that was very limited, very niche, and they just never had a breakout success. Now, of course, as an entrepreneur, if you're coming from venture, there's this mindset of like um 10x. A great outcome that is you're trying to get to these billions in revenue and you're trying to have like the big public exit. So that's a little bit of that mindset. And now, of course, there's a lot of different paths to build a business. You can have a small business, you can have a bootstrap business that is profitable. And there's now in the day of AI, like with prototyping, also distribution, there's a lot of viable paths. And so I think you should be intellectually honest with yourself about what your preferred outcome is and like what you want for yourself and the company and your
Yeah.
shareholders. I would say so I think that did influence me a bit because I was in venture capital. I've always been in this like 10x mindset of like how do we build this rapidly? How do we get rapid growth, which maybe not everyone is coming from or wants that kind of same outcome.
What would your 10 like what's one of your 10x mindsets that you sort of apply when you think about when you brought into Arcade when you think about that rapid growth? Like what are the things that you sort of like say no to or focus on and then and when you're thinking about growing really rapidly.
The first day, my co-founder and I sat down. We were like in our office. It was like a we work. We were just talking about the goals in the company, and I was like, okay, this year I want to make at least $1 million in revenue. And at the time, he was like, "Are you crazy? Like, we haven't like how could you get to that level?" For me, it was like, what is almost like the question is the question behind the question, which is like what is needs to be true to get there, and maybe you won't hit that number, but like how do we work backwards from business development and also our product development and like our hiring to like our monetization strategy to get to that number? And I think that someone who may not have potentially like the same kind of exposure or like and everyone I think one thing I've like learned in building this business and hiring a bunch of people is that everyone's motivated by very different things, and you have to get to know who they are and understand what they're motivated by to like understand what the best outcome will be for them. But yeah, that's one example of that.
Where did you meet your co-founder? Like going back
Yeah.
prior to the start.
We worked together at Atlassian. Um, he was actually the one who built the original version of Joe Service Dash, which is the product that I was marketing. We didn't know each other as well, but then we were reintroduced through one of my now investors on the cap table, Eric Whitman. He's the CEO of Visco, which is a awesome app. And
Yeah.
so that was how we started building together. And I think that what people tend to forget about is like the co-founder is really important. But, like any relationship, whether it's marriage or like neighbors or anything, you're taking a leap of faith where like you have a lot of information, you have a good sense of what your both the values are, but then it's not until you start working together and the rubber hits the road do you understand like what your first principles are and how you work through conflict. And so I was really lucky that Rich and I had an amazing collaboration, and we just complement each other so well in many ways. So that was one of the best decisions we made for the business. But yeah, it could have easily have like not gone well.
My gosh, like I remember you're right, and you're taking such a leap of faith. Like it's almost like when dating, you could date somebody for a couple of months or even 6 months, or like, but it's not until you go on like a European trip with that, like out of the cut, like long periods of time that you're like, okay, like all of a sudden these things start to uncover,
Really,
and it's such a huge it feels like such a huge risk and you're just crossing your fingers that were there things that when you started to, like ideate with your co-founder and like work on that you saw that you were like I think we could be a pretty good yin and yang. Were there things that kind of like gave you good signals that you were willing to like jump in off this cliff with them?
yeah. I mean, I think that Rich is essentially a amazing prototyper. Like he's a 0 to 1 guy. And I didn't realize how lucky he was until I actually later in the journey working with a lot of different engineers and a lot of, like at this point I worked with at least 20. So I've seen all the flavors. I've seen like, not all of them, but like, a fair amount. It's a really unique skill set to have a blank slate where like there's no product. There's no concept of this thing, like, okay, now you need to figure out, do you use Vercel? Like, do you like what's the minimal version viable product component of this? And so that is something I was really lucky with. Personality wise, we complement each other well, and I think I know how to say this, but when you have two dominant personalities, it actually can really it's like a recipe for disaster. Where like as soon as there's like a conflict or um, and I think you should obviously have a healthy relationship where you can learn from each other, you give each other feedback, like, but there needs to be one. I think that when you have a CEO and like a CTO or like a early leadership team, I actually believe in hierarchy. I think that when you're moving quickly, you have a market to capture and you need to make tough calls. Someone needs to clearly own the decisions and in certain categories. And I think that I've gotten to know a lot of founders and a lot of other teams who started around the same time I did. And what I've seen play out so often is that they have this misguided concept that they're equal partners in like decision making. And the second something, they don't agree on something, then they just have this huge combustion. And like, so I think that with Rich and I, it was always very clear, like I was a CEO, he was a CTO, he owned technical decisions, but when it came to business decisions or even product decisions and other things, that was something I ultimately owned. And he just had very low ego. So, in fact, there was a few other co-founders that I interviewed and almost worked with up to that point, and it didn't work out because I deep down felt like there was this something was off. Like they would argue about like certain VCs to work with, and I was like, I could just see this becoming more of a problem long term, like where the second something's not ambiguous or hard, they're just gonna have a lot of issues.
Yeah. The choo-choo's off and you're just like, "Oh, it's only gonna get worse." If you're not even in hard problems yet and you're this early, it's just gonna get, like, worse. So what was the first, like, month or 2 like, especially when you all, like, made the decision? You're like, "We're doing this." Incorporation, domain names, like, you're, like, in it. What was that period like?
Yeah. So I think the first thing was working with a customer. So we were lucky that Coder was our first ever customer. And so we just built a prototype with them and it was the world's most rudimentary thing. So we built it for them and they just gave us a ton of feedback every single week. That was how we got started. And I remember feeling anxious in that first month because I was like, oh my God, like, how is this progress? We were just talking to this one customer and I guess we were building what they needed. What I didn't realize though is that it was actually invaluable in some ways because what they wanted was very reflective of a lot of similar customers, what they wanted. So by the time we built a self-service product, at this point, it was like completely services based, meaning like we were doing something very custom for them. When we translated that to the core product, a lot of the requirements were one our customer base. So, for example, they really wanted Panism functionality, which is something you kind of take, you don't really necessarily think about, but and that's also one of our hero features, some to this day that people love. So
And so to give context, we're Stacklist is a customer, and I love Arcade in the product. I try everything on the market because I want to understand how it works, and I want to look at UI UX and design and flow, but also like functionality that would for our team. And the first time that I logged in and I downloaded a desktop app and I recorded myself basically using Stacklist and then hitting stop and immediately having this like interactive tutorial that I could send to a customer was amazing because recorded countless hours of like Loom videos and myself and like just like sending videos and and there's just so much work that goes into like trying to create a knowledge base with all the documentation, the videos, and all of those kind of pieces. But the simplicity and the design and the UX and the flow and everything. That's why I was like immediately, I think your sort of like welcome email. I was like, hi, I love this. It's great. Like kudos to you and the team. Like
no, I love talking to customers like you, and I thank you for your feedback, and thank you for thinking about the product experience. And I think one thing I'm really really glad to hear that, and something I care deeply about, and also the team is a big reason why it's so simple and delightful and easy to use. And the thing that I will say is the simplicity is really hard to do in practice. It's requires a lot of ruthless decision making of like this truly needed in the product. And I think that paying attention to those details is so underrated. And that's why, and I know I drive the team crazy, but like a lot of times I make sure to use the product at least once every few days. And if I notice a bug or if I notice something that's not quite um, user friendly, like I'm gonna like call like the person who built it and um, maybe disrupt their dinner. But like at least I'm coming from a place of like wanting to always ensure we have something that's really user friendly and that any stranger that comes to the product is going to be delighted. And it's consistent trust that you have to earn. Even this morning, I was like upset about something. So that's something I hope we continue to earn. So yeah.
it's amazing. So, and I'm gonna put like some of my arcades in a stack in the show notes and stuff like that, and link to all the arcade material. But what was the first prototype like? Because obviously now it's so self service that you just record and basically it's like, look, here's 30 steps with the interactive process and the notes and all that sort of stuff. Like, what was V1? Was it just record and send us a video and we'll do everything for you manually?
Yeah, so I'm going through my computer because I have somewhere what I call vintage arcade. And it might take a while before I find it. But
I love that. I
this,
have my first wireframes, which when I go back and look at them, they're so gross. Like
yeah,
they're like, how did an engineer even like decode this?
yeah, this is I got one. I It's pretty bad. Let me see. So you can see this, right?
Yeah.
So this is like vintage arcade where you can see, you're an arcade user, you can see how like rudimentary it is. Like there's barely any UI. You
Hmm.
have like this really ugly, like, add hotspot, add a call to action. The icons are like out of a stock library. So it's like so so bad. Mm. Yeah, so
It
that's
was even clean back then, but like you've evolved the cleanliness, but like even the sparse like this the sparse sort of UI of just keeping it really really focused on what you're doing. It's really cool to see the early stuff.
yeah, it's just crazy. Like actually I have an even earlier version. So it's the world's ugliest. 1 second.
This is like going back to this is like pen and napkin. Just like at the cat like Mel's diner. Like
So this is what the original
oh,
Chroma
that's
stencil looked like.
amazing.
So very different today, and what you can see is that the screenshot of the cord, it was like barely designed. So Yeah.
Those are literally like stock HTML. Like if someone had HTML CSS like 4, it was like add button. Like, I love it.
But
That's so good.
yeah, but I think the other thing is I really care about is just launch now, launch the ugly thing and get feedback. I just even though I'm trying to still in the product team today is like, don't get too booked up about the beautiful product design and like just get feedback as soon as possible.
And just ship it, especially when you're early. You're going to have a handful of people that are going to write back and go, this doesn't work. You're like, amazing. I'm going to fix it like this afternoon. Like, tell me about it or whatever, versus like, like being, we actually, for the longest time, we always shipped to Prod on Friday. we always made such a thing about it because we were just like, just get it, like, just do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. And so what was like when you started working through some of these early prototypes and working with early customers, what was some of your early like fundraising? Like, when did you sort of start did you do a friends and family and angel round? Like, what was the first round of fundraising like?
Yeah, so the first round was actually the first ever investor was this guy named Jen, who's was a Sequoia scout at the time, and he's an amazing investor. And then so we started off very small, and then we did an initial seed round of about 2.5 million, and that was led by a DT at a fund, and she's still to this day like just got off the phone with her, but just an amazing investor and partner. So yeah, that's how we got initially started, and then from there, just like this, we grew the business and the product. And I would say a pivotal moment was in May 2022, where we were like the market had changed and like people were freaking out. And so then that was when we raised another round. And I think that candidly, I don't know if we would have survived if we hadn't raised that round from foundation. And then that's when we started generating a lot more revenue. So definitely a key
How
moment.
did it feel like in that moment? Like, so you're facing extinction, you're thinking, you're looking at the bank account's got like $1,000. I'm just making it up, but like you're sort of looking at the money dwindling and you're trying to figure out like what was the entrepreneurial founder CEO sort of, going through your brain at that time.
Yeah, I'll never forget. You remember the time and the place, like when if something washes over you. And at the time, I was in New York in this office. I was like reading some news reports about like, the market's changing. I called Matilde Cullen, who's at the time she was a CEO of fund and was an early investor. And I was like, what do you think of this market situation? And she was like, and it was still early. This was like May. So I think a lot of founders at the time were like, oh, we'll wait until the fall, like we'll see something change. And Matilda was like, this is you gotta decide now, like if what your game plan is. Like how much runway do you have? Like and you need to go to market like next 2 weeks because things will get only worse from here. And if you have less than 2 years of runway, then you're like in serious trouble. So I was like, holy shit. And I'm in the New York City looking around this office. And I'm like, I really do not anticipate that I'm going to go to market in 2 weeks. And I looked at every single expense and I looked at our runway. I looked at like our employees and I immediately parted ways with someone who was not working well because it needed the cash and like and then I went to market 2 weeks later and it was definitely stressful. But I do think that, I mean, I'm not perfect. I made many mistakes, but I think that one thing that's really important if you're running business is taking risks very seriously and being decisive and acting. Because I think that by not making a decision and pretending everything's fine, you're actually deciding. You're like, in some ways, being a passive participant.
Right.
And you're letting the world happen to you. Another example is when we raised around Tuesday, I knew the election was coming. And now I didn't, obviously it's hard to predict that kind of thing, but I was like, I knew it was going to be unstable. Even though it had nothing to do with that business, like it was going to be an issue. So I made sure I did a deadline to the legal team, like we need to close, like the cash needs to be in bank before the election results are announced. But at the time, I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's kind of overreacting." But I have multiple founder friends who were raising during that period, and their van fell apart like within weeks of the election because like people just like were really freaked out, like their companies were also impacted by government spending, and so like
Uh-huh.
um I just think you kind of have to be smart. You kind of have to like recognize risk when you see them, and I still miss them, but like at least they're really thoughtful about it. So
Well, and listen to your gut. I think a lot of times you might not have even known all the different things that went into some of those decisions, like internally, the what experience and how you're feeling about things and the input that you're taking in and all that sort of stuff. As a CEO, that like you just have this strong feeling this is how we need to do, and other people, oh, you're overreacting. Don't worry about it, whatever. Like it's a hard. Those lessons are so valuable, but hard in the moment when you're sort of like, no, I'm sticking up my guns on this one. This is I can just feel it. Um,
yeah, I guess like the last thing I'll say in this is like Andy Grove is I love Apple, they're one of my favorite companies, but
oh,
Andy Grove I think is from the former CEO of Intel from he wrote a book, Only the Paranoid Survive. And I don't know, I think he's really onto something. I think that even though it's a chip maker and a very different world today, the people who are paranoid, the people who are always thinking about how the world is changing are the ones who survive and thrive.
that's so good. So what's next? Like what's where does our kid go from here? What's the next like chapter you're focused on?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of paranoia, we are doing a big investment in AI. So we've already done a ton of investments around synthetic audio to copy generation to having intelligent content based on that. Um, but we are building agents for go-to-market workflows, and then we're also building intelligent content creation. So meaning we're going into video, we're also going into image content creation through AI. It's a very it candidly is completely like new product line. It's changing the category we're playing in, and it's exciting and it's also scary. But it's something I know that we need to do to stay on top of the market and also win it. So really excited to see how we evolve and meet the market. It's coming out in the next few weeks. So looking forward to your reaction and also the company's.
Totally. I'm gonna be all over it. I'll give you all the feedback. And I'm excited too because I think when you talk about that, like when I think about what Arcade does and what it does really well, and I think about how typically you would think about anchoring your company in that, what's so interesting is that when you go into AI and agents and further into content creation and it's almost like you're starting to absorb these other adjacent categories that like it's really interesting to think about what Arcade will look like in 3 years.
I know.
Um,
I'm sure I don't even fully know what it's going to be in a few years, but
That's so exciting. Amazing. Well, so okay, so POV. Before we wrap up, like if you were to go back to um, the version of you that first week in the WeWork, and you're starting to figure it out, and you've got raw HTML buttons on your Chrome extension, and you're just figuring out where to go. For those people that are sort of in those super early moments of like buying a domain name and being like, I should learn how to build a pitch deck. Like, what would the one or two things be that you would be like, your piece of advice to give?
number one is be passionate about what you're doing. I think that I talked earlier about markets. I talked earlier about like being thoughtful about what's a long term business opportunity. Building a company is like, excuse my language, is like freaking hard. Like even when it's successful, even when it's growing, it's you're gonna have HR issues, you're gonna have legal issues, you're gonna have customer churn, you're gonna have like there could be 1,000 reasons for you to quit. And so like you have to have some joy from what you're doing and stay close to that joy. Because as the business grows, as your role grows, you're gonna have things you just don't enjoy doing, and you're gonna get really burnt out if you are not thoughtful about like how you spend your time. So stay close to the joy. and be passionate about it, and like really ask yourself the question, like when you're starting a company, like, am I passionate about insurance? Like, am I passionate about this? Because if you're not, in a few years, you're probably gonna like get bored and quit. The second, so be passionate, and stay close to joy. And the second thing is, it's okay to fail and make mistakes. Like, I think that a lot of times, get anchored to like, a certain launch or, like a certain deal. And that one, like, yes, you can have something that's really important to you and, like that one pitch or something, but, um, the reality is that you're gonna have a ton of rejection, a ton of failures, and it's really are you able to pattern map? And, um, yeah, I remember, like, was one launch we did around Teams, which is, this new product at the time, and nobody signed up. And I was like, "Holy shit, like, are we going out of business?" Like, we spent, like, months on this product, and it was really embarrassing for me and the company, and I remember, like, I actually was in bed around, like, 4:30, just being, like, depressed and, like, "Wow, like, what just happened?" But what I didn't know in that moment was that it was gonna be one of the most successful product we've ever done because it was the beginning of our enterprise product, and that's how we were able to upsell many of our accounts into larger contracts. But that was a slow evolution. That was like the next few months. And so I wish I had told myself in that moment at 4:30 in the bed, like it's gonna be okay. Like, it may not be the launch you wanted that today, but like it's a long-term investment and you're going to see the compounding results. So, yeah, be passionate, stay close to joy, and don't get too attached to like, one-off moments. You should be realistic. I mean, you should see the patterns, but yeah, it's important to like have the long-term view.
It
Yeah.
goes back to that fluidity. Like I'll yes and your last one, which is kind of like just being very fluid with your expectations. That when something happens, that you just go, hmm, all right, well, we'll see how that turns out, and then just like keep moving.
I have like
Uh,
I have such I have much lower what's the word, bar for embarrassment. Like I think that in the beginning I was so nervous about LinkedIn posts and like, what do people think is weird? And now I'm like, I have an awkward post like every other day and like, you know, the other day we just had an announcement that I didn't think it didn't go that well. And I was just like, all right, team, like, obviously we don't want this again, but like, what can we learn from this? Like, how can we make sure it doesn't happen again? And ensure it doesn't happen again. But I think that my resilience is just so much higher, and I have so much lower, I guess, ego over time of like, I'm gonna have some really awkward failures and it can be in public and it can be embarrassing, but I'm now much more comfortable, and I think that's evolution. It's so different from the version of myself when I started the company. So.
well, don't worry. I will always give over the top reactions on your awkward LinkedIn posts. I'll be like, this is amazing, and I'll repost it or share it or whatever. So don't.
Thank you, and great to talk, and can't wait to see this podcast.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for the time.